Hey guys, this is Miss Jamie and welcome back to another Online Gate Academy. As you can see today, we're not going to be doing arts and crafts, we're going to be baking instead. So I thought it would be fun to show you guys just a little baking basics tutorial or video. And in this video, what I'm going to do is show you the different ingredients that you need to bake chocolate chip cookies. And I'm going to explain to you a little bit about what each ingredient does and how if you combine the ingredients in different ways, you can get a different texture cookie. So you can get a chewy cookie, a crispy cookie, or a classic cookie that's kind of chewy in the middle and crispy on the edges. And I think all of us have a favorite type of cookie that we like to eat. I personally like chewy cookies, and so I use the chewy version when I make cookies. So you're not going to need all of these ingredients. You're not going to need 6 eggs and 2 bags of chocolate chips. I just put them all out here so that you can see the ingredients that I'm talking about, okay? And so just a reminder, these videos are totally optional. You don't have to do these videos, you don't have to watch the videos, but if you want to bake cookies for your family or if you just are craving chocolate chip cookies or something, then watch the video, and you can either use the recipes that I'm going to link down in the description box below, and I will label them chewy cookies, crispy cookies, and classic. Or you can use your own favorite chocolate chip cookie recipe and enjoy it with your family. And also another important reminder, since we're using YouTube and not YouTube Kids, make sure you guys practice internet safety and just let your parents know that you want to watch the video. And especially when you bake these cookies, also let a parent know, since we're going to be using the oven, you're going to have to be a little bit careful about that. Okay, so the very first thing that you have to do when you start baking or cooking is actually read the recipe. Okay, so my favorite cookie recipe is in this book, and I've made it lots of times, but the reason why you want to read the recipe carefully is because maybe you don't have an ingredient that you need, so you have to go out and get it, or some recipes will say chill the dough for 2 hours and you don't have 2 hours to do that. So it's all about planning, so make sure you read the recipe one time all the way through so that you understand what we're doing and you have all the ingredients available. Okay, so that's step 1. The next step is to gather all your ingredients, and so in this portion of the video I'm going to explain about each ingredient and kind of what it does in the recipe. And so if you are already a fabulous baker and an accomplished chef and you don't need to know any of these things, you can just skip the video and bake the cookies and enjoy them sooner than later. Okay, so the first ingredient I'm going to start with is butter. Okay, all delicious desserts probably contain butter and cookies are no exception. But the thing about butter is, if you look here on my box says unsalted butter. And almost all the time in baking, I would say probably 99% of the time, the recipe says unsalted butter. And the reason why that is because unsalted butter has no salt in it. And we don't want our desserts to be salty. So you use unsalted butter so that you can control how much salt that you put in later. In the market, it'll mark on the box, it'll say unsalted or salted butter. And you should always try to use unsalted butter when baking. If you don't have unsalted butter at home, that is fine. You can use regular salted butter, just use less salt in the recipe, okay? So for example, if you use salted butter and the recipe says half a teaspoon of salt, maybe put only a 1/4 teaspoon of salt because your butter already has salt in it, or else it'll be a little bit salty of a cookie, which you might actually like. So unsalted butter is always important. The next thing, I guess, since we're talking about salt, is salt, okay? So it might surprise you, but all baked goods, cookies, cakes, puddings, whatever pie you like has salt in it. It doesn't have a lot of salt in it like burgers or french fries, but it does have a little bit of salt in it to make it taste not bland or boring. So sometimes if you've eaten maybe a cookie or a cake and you feel like, it's not that good, it kind of feels like it's missing something, it might be because it doesn't have enough salt in it. So only a little bit goes in, not enough to make the batter salty, but it makes it taste delicious. Okay, the next thing I want to talk about is eggs. Okay, so everybody, I'm sure, has eggs at home, and what eggs do in a batter is, eggs is kind of like the glue that glues the batter together. So when we make cookies, we use flour, we use sugar, we use butter, and all of those ingredients are kind of dry, and even when you mix the butter in, it kind of turns into like a wet sand, right? And then when you add the flour, we need something to kind of stick it all together. And so eggs are kind of like the glue of the batter. Okay, eggs also help the batter to kind of poof a little bit, right? Like if you look at these cookies, they're not completely flat, right? Like a piece of paper. They do have a little bit of poof, so it does help to poof it up. And also the egg yolk, because it has fat in it, it kind of makes it taste very rich and delicious, okay? So eggs are an important part. And generally when you bake, it'll say room temperature eggs, okay? That just means to take out the egg that you need and just leave it on the counter for maybe like 1 hour or 2 hours. Same thing with the butter. It'll say room temperature butter, and that's just so that the butter is not rock hard when you put it in the mixer, because if you try to mix rock hard butter, it'll just probably fling out of the bowl. So with your butter and your eggs, make sure you bring them to room temperature, which means just to leave them out on the counter for, I would say, about 2 hours until they become, you know, the same temperature as the room. And then the butter will also become nice and soft, so it'll be easy to mix and blend it, okay? And then so the next thing I want to talk about is sugar, okay? So we all know about white sugar. This is my little sugar container. It says sugar here. We all know about white sugar, right? But there is another type of sugar called brown sugar, and that is exactly the name indicates, it's brown sugar. And what brown sugar is, it's a combination of molasses and white sugar. Okay, so molasses comes from a plant, sugar cane or sugar beets, and molasses is just the liquid that they extract from it. And when you mix molasses with white sugar, it turns into brown sugar. Okay, now if you have molasses and white sugar at home and you combine them together, it's not going to turn into brown sugar because there are other processes that go on. But you do need brown sugar if you want to make a chewy version of a cookie, and if you want to make a classic version of the cookie. And the reason is that brown sugar, because it has molasses in it, is actually very soft. If you look here, it's really like wet sand. When you go to the beach and you have like wet sand, it's very soft, which means it has more moisture in it than white sugar. So if you want a chewy textured cookie, then you have to make the dough more moist. And one of the ways that we do that is by adding brown sugar with the white sugar, okay? One other interesting thing about white sugar is that white sugar actually makes things more brown, okay? So if you look at this cookie here, the crispy cookie, and if you look at this one here, chewy cookie, you can tell that this one is more brown. That's because this cookie only has white sugar, and this one has a combination of brown and white sugar. So the combination of brown and white sugar makes this one more chewy, but it makes this one more brown. All right, so that's kind of what white sugar and brown sugar does to our recipes. Okay, so the next thing I guess I'll talk about is baking powder and baking soda. Now in baking, these are called leaveners, okay? And to levitate or to leaven means to rise, right? So when you bake a cake, you want it to be tall and poofy, so you add baking powder and baking soda. When you bake cookies, you don't want them to be poofy, right? We want them to just be a little bit flattish, so then you add baking soda. And the reason is, both of these will help your dough rise and become poofy, but baking powder helps it to rise a lot, and baking soda helps it to be tender or soft, okay? So sometimes you need both. Like in a cake, you want it to be poofy and you want it to be soft. But in a cookie, you don't really want it to be poofy, you just want it to be like tender and not rock hard, so you put baking soda, okay? So baking powder helps things to rise and have a poofy texture, and baking soda helps things to rise but have a softer texture. And so that's why kind of we use both, all right? Now, another thing that we want to add to our cookies, so we've added eggs and butter and salt and sugar, is our flour, okay? So flour is really the structure of the cookie or cake or whatever you're baking. Without flour, you just have like a wet, sticky mixture, but you have to add the flour to make everything hold together and come to a dough. Now there are all different types of flours, and if you go to the market, you'll see they have all-purpose flour, bread flour, self-rising flour, wheat flour, and all of that. But in all baking, just all-purpose white flour is fine. And if you want to use other types of flours, you kind of have to adjust the measurements, but we're not going to do any of that. So just all-purpose flour is perfect for cookie baking. Okay, now let's see. One other thing that we need in baking is a flavoring called vanilla extract. Okay, so almost all cookies or baked goods have vanilla as their basic flavor, and you know, you guys know what vanilla tastes like, right? Vanilla ice cream or something, and it just has like a vanilla flavor. And even though you put this, even though you're like, well, I don't really like vanilla, I only like chocolate, it's not going to make your whole cookie taste like vanilla, but it'll help it so that it doesn't taste just like flour and butter. So we have to put a little bit of vanilla extract, and you can buy this at the market in the baking aisle. They have little boxes of it, and you only need a little bit. So if you buy one bottle, it'll last you a long time. Okay, now the most important thing obviously for chocolate chip cookies is chocolate chips, right? So most all recipes say semi-sweet. If you read right here, it'll say semi-sweet chocolate chip. That means that it's not too sweet and it's not too bitter at all. Now chocolate, if you guys know, comes from a plant, right? The cocoa tree and a cocoa pod, right? And so there are all different types of chocolate. There's milk chocolate, which is the sweetest kind, okay? There's the semi-sweet, which is like the middle. So it's a little bit sweet, but it has a little bit of a bitter taste as well. And then you can also buy bittersweet chocolate, right? Which is not very sweet at all, and it has a more bitter flavor, okay? You can also buy white chocolate, right? I have some white chocolate chips here. You can even buy mini chocolate chips. If you look here, they're very mini sized, right? And any of these types of chocolate chips will work in your cookies, okay? It just depends on if you like a sweeter chocolate flavor, or if you like the chocolate flavor but you don't want it to be too sweet. So when I bake chocolate chip cookies, I actually always use bittersweet, because I don't like my cookies to be too sweet, and since they put sugar in it and things, I always use bittersweet chocolate. But you can use semi-sweet, and you can use milk chocolate. If you use milk chocolate, it'll be pretty sweet, so I don't know if you want to really do that. And if you look on this bag, it says 60% cacao, right? So the higher the percentage of your chocolate, the more bitter it'll be. So this is 60%. There are some chocolates that have even more, like 70%. I think semi-sweet chocolate is, I think it's about 30 to 45% cacao. So, you know, it's not super sweet, but it's sweet enough, and it'll be perfect for your cookies, okay? So whatever type of chocolate chips you have, it will be fine for the cookies. Sometimes you can even just, if you don't have chocolate chips, but maybe you have like a chocolate bar, maybe your mom or somebody has a chocolate bar in the fridge, you can also just cut it up into pieces. Like just, you know, use a rolling pin, or have your parent chop it up for you, and you can just chop it up into small pieces. See, there's even a picture of cookies here on the container. So you could just chop up the chocolate bar into pieces, and you can add it to the dough there. It's totally fine. Okay, so I think we're good with all the ingredients, right? So I've explained kind of what the ingredients do, and how if you combine different types of ingredients, what type of texture it'll come out. And so now I'll kind of explain to you guys about the tools that you might need, okay? So when we bake cookies, when you bake in general, you have to measure all the ingredients very carefully and very accurately. If you put too much eggs or too much sugar, too much flour, then your dough won't come out the way you want it to, and it'll taste kind of gross. So you need some measuring tools. So these are measuring cups, okay? And these are used for measuring mostly dry ingredients, but you can measure like milk, or you can measure things like that. And they come in different sizes, and they have the measurements labeled. This one says 1/3 cup. This one says 1 cup, right? So you use these measuring cups to measure like the flour and the sugar and the chocolate chips, things like that. If you don't have measuring cups, you probably have something that looks like this, a measuring glass measuring cup, and you can use this as well because it has the same 1 cup and half cup and things. But this kind of measuring cup is good for measuring wet ingredients. For example, if you have to put oil, or if you have to put milk, or even with the eggs, if you have to put 2 eggs, you can crack the eggs in here, mix them up a little bit, and then pour it into your batter with this. So if you don't have measuring cups, you can use a glass measuring cup. But measuring cups are really handy for lots of different things, and you can even play with these and stuff if you have like kinetic sand or something. So it's good to buy measuring cups if you don't have any, but if you don't have them, you can use this. I'm sure a lot of us have this at home. Okay, another thing that is really important other than the measuring cups is measuring spoons. So if you want to bake, you really do need measuring spoons, because things like baking soda, baking powder, and salt, it asks for like half a teaspoon or 1/4 teaspoon, and it's really hard to measure that without measuring spoons. So even if you don't have measuring cups, that's okay, but you should really try to go out and buy measuring spoons if you want to do any type of baking or cooking even in the future. Okay, now another thing that might be useful is a mixer to mix the dough. So a lot of you guys might have this type of mixer at home, right? Like it has a cord and you plug it in, you put these little beaters in there and you turn it on and you mix it. So this is perfectly fine to use, and it's handy, it's portable, you can put it away. So if you have this, then use this for your dough. Maybe you guys are kind of more of an advanced cooking family and you have this guy, which is called a stand mixer, and this one is a little bit more heavy duty, and you put it on your counter and you put the dough in there and you do the same thing. But this one is kind of a big and expensive machine, so if you don't have this and you have the handheld one, that's fine. If you don't have either of them, what can you do? Well, I have a solution for that. If you have a whisk, you can always mix the butter and the sugar and the eggs with a whisk, right? I think all of us probably have a whisk. Okay, if you don't have a whisk, then you can use either a wooden spoon or maybe even like a spatula. Okay, it's just going to take a little more effort to blend all of it together, but a wooden spoon, let me go get a wooden spoon. Ta-da! A wooden spoon like this is just perfect, and you just have to mix everything really well, use some arm muscles to mix your dough. Okay, another thing that you will need when you bake is a baking pan. So when you make the dough and you scoop it out, you have to scoop it onto a baking pan, okay, or a baking sheet is what they normally call it, and it just looks like this. And you guys probably have, mine's very dirty because I've had it for many years, but you guys probably have this at home, right? So this is what you're going to use to put the dough on, okay? And usually the instructions will say line with parchment paper, which is just like a type of baking paper that you can get at the market. But if you don't have this, just use aluminum foil. That is completely fine. So this is something that you kind of have to go out and buy, but we all have aluminum foil at home, so you can always line it with aluminum foil. If you don't have parchment paper and you don't have aluminum foil, you can put the cookies directly on the tray. They just might stick a little bit, so maybe you want to spray some baking spray, or you want to brush it with butter, melted butter a little bit. But you can put them just on here. It'll just maybe stick, or maybe it'll be a little bit messy. But if you don't have parchment paper, you don't have aluminum foil, then you can use this, okay? Now, the next thing that will be very handy when you bake cookies is to have a certain type of scoop or a way to measure out the cookie dough onto the tray. Okay, so let me see, let me move here some of the things. So when you bake, after you mix all the dough and it becomes a nice dough here, you have to scoop the cookies onto the tray. so here's my dough here that I made, and I made the chewy version, okay? So I, mixed all the eggs and the butter, sugar, flour, and I added my chocolate chips, okay? And so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna use a scoop like this. It looks like an ice cream scoop, but it's a little bit smaller because an ice cream scoop is really, really big. So the important thing about cookie baking is to make your dough balls all of the same size. So for example, if I have a dough ball that's this big, and then I have another dough ball next to it that's this big, this one will burn and crisp before this one even bakes all the way through. So then you'll have one burnt cookie and one cookie that's underdone. So you have to try to make all of your cookie balls exactly the same shape and size so that they will all bake evenly in the oven, okay? So using a cookie scoop like this, and if you go to the market or Target, anywhere you go, you can find cookie scoops. If you use a cookie scoop like this, I can measure out exactly how much dough I want for each cookie, right? I can press it in, and I could say each cookie is gonna be this much. And if I put it here, there's one. If I put another, there's two. And each of my cookies will be the exact same size. And then so they'll bake at the exact same time. If you don't have a cookie scoop, because not all of us have cookie scoops, and sometimes you don't want to go out and buy one, you can just use a spoon. Just make sure that when you scoop them out, use your judgment, and if you scoop one this big, then when you scoop the next one, make sure they're about the same size. Show you like that. Okay, so they're about the same size. This one's a little bit bigger maybe, but they're about the same size, okay? You just don't want one that's really big and one that's really small because they won't bake at the same time, okay? So, I think that's pretty, oh, nope, one very important thing. Now, when you bake in the oven, right, number one, you need a grown-up to help you because the oven will be hot and the pan will be very hot because baking pans are made of metal or tin. You also need oven mitts. And these are my little oven mitts that I use because when you open the oven and when the cookies are done, you do not ever want to touch this pan with your bare hands because you'll burn your fingers and you'll get a blister and it'll be painful. So you always have to wear oven mitts, and they have little fishies on the inside to help you. But I suggest, unless you are an upper grader, maybe like 5th or 6th grade. If you are younger, like 2nd grade, 3rd grade, 4th grade even, I don't suggest, please don't try to take things out of the oven yourself. Even if you're wearing the oven mitts, I would just suggest that you ask your parent to do that part for you because it's very dangerous and I don't want you guys to get burned just because you wanted to eat cookies. Okay, so I think that's about it for this video. So like I said, I will link the recipes down below, and if you guys want to make the cookies, send us pictures of them and send us pictures of you enjoying your cookies, and maybe you can even explain what type of cookie you like, whether it's chewy, crispy, or classic, and why you like it so much. Alright, so I'm really excited to see what you guys bake up, and I'm sure it'll be delicious and fun. Alright, thanks. See you next time. Bye-bye.